In the 60s, Richard Brautigan wrote this book called Trout Fishing in America. It's kind of difficult to talk about because the title refers to something that's a place, an activity, a state of mind, and a character. If you were to ask him to describe early drafts, he would probably say it's like trying to interact with a memory, to which you would tell him, shut the fuck up, and would stop reading his writing, which is a perfectly fair response. He was a dude who wrote poetry about his penis and published it. He also gave off the vibe he slept with 16-year-olds, mostly because in his book, The Hawkline Monster, his characters repeatedly have sex with a 15-year-old. It's not good at all. That one's really bad. But he's notable to me for The Pumpkin Tide and Dreaming of Babylon. The Pumpkin Tide's this like short 5, 6 sentence poem, while Dreaming of Babylon's this around 200-page novel about a shitty private eye in San Francisco. It's basically the story of being in debt and hustling, but all framed through the eyes of a PI in a period setting, so it becomes actually interesting.
Well, it's not often, it's more like 4 times every 6 months, but Paul Schrader will sometimes appear in my dreams. In all of them, he doesn't like me, and in one of them, he stole several of my Blu rays. And I find this phenomenon mostly funny. It's not really a mystery why Schrader appears. His work appeals to me for a number of obvious reasons, like I'm lonely, I'm depressed, I'm fed up with the world, etc., etc. But I think a reason why I believe Paul Schrader wouldn't like me is that there's this horrible interview he did on the Adam Friedland show where Friedland repeatedly tries to get him to laugh, but none of the jokes land, and Friedland keeps acknowledging none of the jokes land, but Paul ignores that and the jokes, and it's so awkward. It's also just kind of a surface level interview because Friedland doesn't seem like he knows who he's talking to. Most of the time is spent on Taxi Driver and Last Temptation of Christ, but like, come the fuck on. This is one of the most interesting living writers at one of the most reflective points in his career, and you're not going to talk about the odd little artifacts he crafted, like the canyons or the Company of Strangers. Friedland references several lesser known people Schrader's worked with, but he never escapes the bubble of Scorsese and Defoe. What about Bret Easton Ellis, huh? What about Christopher Walken? What about Brian De Palma? What about Sidney Pollack? There's this county in Cali known for its like frog stuff. It's Calaveras, the one from Mark Twain, kinda. Twain's one of those writers like Tony Gilroy, who I always think of as Californian. You hear an interview with Tony Gilroy, and he sounds like he's from the Bay, and likewise, you watch the stop motion Mark Twain video and get a general feeling from James Whitmore's voice that he's playing a guy from like Napa. But no, one's a New Yorker and the other's a Floridian. But anyway, this town is like populated with frog merch, frog T-shirts, frog figurines, etc. And every year they have this weird like frog fair. I used to go to when I was smaller, where they pit these frogs against each other to jump. And it's weird, and it usually goes wrong because the frogs don't know what's going on, since it's like autumn Californian heat, which is actually more akin to like the sun than normal autumn. But anyways, you'd think that this town would be populated with gay people. And same thing with the fair because gay people love frogs. But it's actually a lot of cowboys and rednecks and rodeo men and awful, awful meat. So it feels like Texas or a dusty old photograph of Texas. I would compare it actually to like Quebec in the way that it's like a transplant of another place into somewhere it kind of shouldn't be, but it's ultimately fine because I don't really hate Texans or Quebecico. But what's made this fair stick out in my memory to me is related to my mother. I have a strained relationship with my mother, and this was like a way for us to visit, and I wanted to leave the entire time, obviously. Kind of understandably so. There's nothing to do at fairs aside from eat really shitty food, and since you're not on drugs, you're not gonna want to eat that much shitty food. And also, my phone was dead, so I was just fed up with it. But I like the memory of it still in my head. It's a very atmospheric place. It was like the dry, grassy hills at twilight, and it was during a time when someone close to me valued something that I didn't really value. I mean, it ultimately reminds me of this David Ulrich review that goes of Magic in the Moonlight that goes, Magic in the Moonlight is a bit like having a lunch with your aging parents. Strained, overly familiar, sometimes amusing, but genuinely seldom funny. You count the minutes until it's over, only to spend the day wishing it had never ended. I mean, I don't wish it never ended. I just hope I may spend more time with it.
Blessings.